What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, I'll be doing my full review of the Samsung Galaxy S20 5G. And this is the regular S20 5G, not the Plus, not the Ultra that everyone is talking about. It's the cheapest new S-series flagship phone you can buy. And if you have any hesitations, I think out of the entire lineup, this is the one you should buy. I genuinely don't believe that the S20 Plus, or especially the S20 Ultra for that matter, offer the added extra value that justifies their extra cost. And I think for a vast majority of people, this phone, the standard S20 5G, offers everything and then some when it comes to a flagship Android device. So the first thing I do want to talk about with this phone is the price. On launch day, this phone retailed for $999. The S20 Plus started at $1,199, and the S20 Ultra was a ridiculous $1,400, which seriously, no one should pay that for a phone. However, at least at the time of filming this video, Amazon and B&H Photo just started offering discounts right now that take $200 off the price of a new S20, bringing the total cost down to $799 for the 128 gig model. And while I'm still going to review this phone as if it were a $1,000 device, I'll say this right now. At $799, this phone is an absolute must buy. I thought it was still pretty good even at $1,000, surprisingly, but knocking off $200 from the price not only makes it easier to swallow, but I think overall makes the purchase more focused on value. I don't know any other phone that packs as much for $799 than the S20. And I don't think you should miss out on this deal. I don't know how long it'll last, but I'll leave all the links to the discounts on Amazon and B&H Photo down below in the video description in case you want to jump on it. So physically, the S20 is a great looking device. I think over the last couple of years, Samsung has pretty much perfected their hardware, and that's evident in the fact that we haven't seen any major changes in a while. But that's okay. It's sort of a if it isn't broke, don't fix it thing. It's the same glass sandwich design with polished metal accents that we've had for years. And aside from some color variations and shiny finishes to keep things fresh, what Samsung has here isn't anything we haven't seen before, which is totally fine. Now, speaking specifically about this S20, this is a phone with a 6.2-inch screen and a body and frame that maximizes that potential. The screen stretches to nearly every corner. We're getting about as good a screen-to-body ratio as you could ask for, and that means that while the screen is big, the phone itself feels manageable in the hand. It's very comfortable, and I think that's most apparent when you compare the S20 to something like the iPhone 11, for example, which has a smaller 6.1-inch display, just in a noticeably chunkier housing. And I think while people may like bigger or maybe even taller phones, the S20 Plus, by the way, is mostly just taller, it's easy to forget that the standard size S20 still has a big screen. And jumping up to the S20 Plus or even the S20 Ultra doesn't earn you more usable screen real estate or bonus display features. They're just taller, more stretched out phones that may be less comfortable or manageable for some people. The S20, in my opinion, is a great balance of maximum screen size and a body that's still comfortable, even with one-handed use. And most importantly, it's actually pretty comfortable in a pocket too. Samsung's displays on their flagship devices are also some of the nicest on any smartphones. There's even some customizability if you feel like things are a bit too punchy or saturated. You can go with a more natural look, but the viewing experience overall right out of the box is great. And the smaller S20 is also technically the phone in the lineup with the highest pixel density given its smaller screen size too. Resolution-wise, you can go all the way up to 3200 by 1440, which we've had before. But what's new this time around, at least as a first from Samsung, is the option to enable a 120Hz refresh rate. If you've never experienced a higher refresh rate on a display or a screen before, it's basically giving you this ultra smooth and fluid look that's mostly evident as you scroll and swipe and launch certain apps. Everything just feels snappier and more responsive, and movements and animations and things look better. But with 120Hz enabled, you're bumped back down to 1080p resolution. So you're sort of left with a choice. Go with a high refresh rate or the maximum screen resolution. For me, after a couple weeks going back and forth, I prefer the higher refresh rate, and I've stuck with it now. I don't really notice the drop in resolution, but I really see and feel the difference in how smooth and fluid the display is. And going back to a phone with a 60Hz display now just doesn't feel right. When you are viewing your content and decide to listen to it out loud through the external speakers, I think overall the listening experience is fine, but it can still use some improvements. The stereo sound that utilizes the earpiece as a second speaker gets plenty loud, but it lacks bass and sounds a little tinny compared to other phones. Again, it's mostly fine and I'm probably just being a bit critical, but I think speakers continue to be a weak spot for a phone with this high of a price point. Performance-wise, obviously, as Samsung's newest flagship phone, you're getting the latest high-end specs, but there's a really important point I want to make here that might significantly impact your purchase decision. I have the Snapdragon version of this phone. It has the 865 paired with the Adreno 650 GPU and 8 gigs of RAM. And I have no complaints. The other version of the S20, the international version with the Exynos 990 and Mali G77 GPU, that phone seems to have a problem with thermal throttling and overheating, like a significant problem, where folks are saying their S20s get noticeably hot to the touch under heavy use, which in turn greatly affects the overall performance. With my Snapdragon S20, that's just not been the case at all. I can push this phone really hard if I want to, and while it may get a tiny bit warm, I haven't experienced any issues. So I know it's going to depend on your region or country or network support or whatever, but if you have the option to buy or import the Snapdragon version of the S20 instead of the Exynos version, you should absolutely do that, especially if you hope to get the most out of your phone with a lot of gaming, high intensity apps, or whatever else. And on the software side of things, I think Samsung has done a nice job with their One UI 2. It still has all the quirks and features of being Samsung's own breed of software, but there's a lot you can change to make it better if you want to. And I think the days of complaining about Samsung adding their own flair to Android are long over. In regards to battery life, the 4,000 milliamp capacity battery is plenty to power this device through a day's use for how I use the phone. And that mainly includes constant Twitter scrolling, plenty of YouTube videos, WhatsApp texting, and a handful of phone calls. Though, as expected, you'll be getting maybe 30 minutes to an hour less battery life over the course of a day when you opt for the 120Hz high refresh display setting. At least that's what I've seen. For me, it's worth the sacrifice because I appreciate the high refresh display and I wasn't stressing the battery anyway in a given day. And the included 25-watt super fast charger can get me 50% charged in just under 30 minutes. While I don't necessarily think the S20 is stellar compared to how long some other phones last, I don't really have any complaints. Before we get into the cameras, let's just touch on a couple of other things that make up this phone. There's the in-display fingerprint reader, which is mostly fine. You get used to the placement, and it's quick enough like 90% of the time, but more often than not, my phone is unlocked via facial recognition anyway, which is what I prefer. You've got wireless charging and reverse wireless charging through PowerShare, where you can charge other people's phones and other accessories you might have, which is cool, I guess, but it's not something I find myself using practically ever. And the phone is water and dust resistant as well, which is an absolute necessity. You spend too much money on this phone anyway, so you should hope it can handle a little accident every once in a while. There's also the matter of the whole 5G thing, which for me is a mixed bag. I didn't get the S20 5G specifically because it was a 5G capable device, and it's a bit misleading anyway because the S20 and S20 Ultra support the ultra-wideband millimeter wave 5G, while the standard S20 is mainly a low-band phone. Where I live with my AT&T network, 5G isn't even really a thought anyway, and AT&T is sort of misleading with their 5G stuff too, like the 5G versus 5G Plus and 5GE thing. It's all very confusing, and I think for the average consumer, unless you know what to ask for from your carrier and what your area of the country even supports right now, the 5G benefit will be negligible at least for a while. So with all the hype and press surrounding the ridiculous camera setup on the S20 Ultra, which included both positive and negative comments, I think it's easy to forget that the standard S20 is still probably a top 3 picture taker in the world of smartphones. Around back, we get a 12 megapixel f1.8 aperture main lens, a 64 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. And honestly, that's really all you need in order to take great pictures in nearly every situation. Just shooting straight from the camera app on auto, there's not a whole lot to complain about. I think the phone captures a lot of detail, and while you do get that more punchy look with brighter, vivid colors, things don't really seem to be overdone. The ultra-wide lens can go a little dark at times, which isn't a huge deal, and the 64 megapixel telephoto lens I found to be particularly useful. Not only can you just utilize it for 64 megapixel regular pictures for improved detail, which is great, but the 3 times optical hardware zoom and up to 30 times digital zoom are particularly handy. The front selfie camera is pretty good too, even for being just a 10 megapixel shooter. Samsung Samsung did push the limits with their new 8K shooting capabilities, which I don't think too many people will ever utilize, but I still respect Samsung for just going all in and offering something like that on a smartphone. And all in all, while I know the S20 received much of the spotlight when it came to camera stuff, the mixed bag of reviews led me to believe that Samsung maybe overextended itself with all the bells and whistles on a phone that most people won't want to pay for anyway. The S20, on the other hand, with its combination of camera hardware, I think is a great balance that offers everything the everyday person could ask for. And that's actually the best way I can sum up the S20. It's a phone that has a great balance of features and potential for a price which, if you take into consideration the discount at $799 right now, is actually pretty fair. With the S20 Plus, and especially the S20 Ultra, you get some diminishing marginal returns. The more you spend, the less extra useful features you seem to get. And by going with just the standard S20, in my opinion, you're getting basically the full package already, while saving a decent chunk of money. And in the end, I do hope that people don't skip over this device, because I do think honestly it's the right phone for a vast majority of folks. But don't let me persuade you, I really want to know what you guys think. Is the standard S20 the way to go, or would you prefer the S20 Plus or S20 Ultra even? I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.